They say silence is the loudest sound in the world, and on the night of November 14th, 1884, at the height of the London season, silence didn't just fall over the ballroom, it crushed it. Duke Sebastian Thorne, a man who controlled half of England's railways, a man who hadn't shown emotion since the day his father died, dropped his champagne glass. It shattered. But no one looked at the glass. They were all looking at her. The woman he had destroyed exactly 1 year ago. She wasn't supposed to be alive, and she certainly wasn't supposed to be holding the deed to his entire estate. This is the story of Elara Vance, and how she turned a duke's rejection into his ultimate reckoning. The rain in Leicestershire didn't wash things clean, it only made the mud deeper. That was what Elara Vance thought as she stood in the library of Blackwood Manor, her sodden hem ruining the expensive Persian rug. She was 20 years old, the daughter of a country physician with eyes the colour of autumn leaves, and a heart that was currently beating so hard she felt dizzy. "Say it again," she whispered. Her voice trembled, betraying the composure she had practiced in the mirror for 3 hours. Sebastian Thorne, the 9th Duke of Blackwood, didn't turn to face her. He stood by the high-arched window, watching the storm batter the gardens. He was tall, his shoulders broad and stiff, in a charcoal frock coat. He looked every inch the powerful aristocrat he was, and nothing like the man who had kissed her by the riverbank 3 days ago. I said, Sebastian spoke his voice devoid of warmth, that our arrangement is at an end, Elara. It was a pleasant diversion, but the season is beginning in London. My duties require me there. A diversion. Elara stepped forward, her hand gripping the back of a leather chair. You asked me to marry you, Sebastian. You gave me a ring. A ring I will require back, he said coldly. He finally turned. His face, usually so full of hidden humor when they were alone, was a mask of granite. His blue eyes, which used to crinkle when he smiled at her clumsy attempts at poetry, were now like ice. You cannot be serious. Elara pleaded, the reality crashing down on her. Is this because of your mother, the Dowager Duchess? This is because of reality. Elara. Sebastian snapped his voice, rising for the first time. Look at this room. Look at this estate. It costs £40,000 a year to maintain Blackwood. You are a doctor's daughter. You bring no dowry, no connections, and no political advantage. Marrying you would be emotional suicide for a man in my position. The cruelty of it took the breath from her lungs. You knew who I was when you pursued me. You knew I had no money when you swore you loved me. I was infatuated, Sebastian said, adjusting his cuffs, refusing to look her in the eye. I have recovered, and now I am engaged to Lady Genevieve Sterling. Her father owns the shipping lines that will save this family from ruin. That is what a duke does, Elara. He secures the legacy. He does not play house with commoners. Elara felt the tears prickling hot and humiliating, but she refused to let them fall. She pulled the simple gold band from her finger, a ring he had given her in secret, and placed it on the mahogany desk. It made a small, pathetic clink against the wood. You are making a mistake, Sebastian, she said, her voice dropping to a haunting whisper. Not because you are leaving me, but because you think money can buy loyalty. Genevieve Sterling does not love you. She loves your title. That is enough, Sebastian commanded. You will leave. I have arranged a carriage to take you to the station. I have also enclosed a cheque for £500. Consider it. Compensation for your time. Elara looked at the envelope on the desk. It was the final insult. She didn't take the money. She didn't scream. She simply straightened her spine, pulling her wet cloak tighter around her. Keep your money, Your Grace, she said. You will need it. Because one day you will realize that you sold your soul for a roof that will still leak on you when it rains. And when that day comes, do not look for me. She walked out of the library, out of Blackwood Manor, and into the storm. Sebastian watched her go. As soon as the door clicked shut, he slumped against the window frame, his face twisting in agony. He looked at the ring on the desk. "Forgive me, Elara," he whispered to the empty room. "It was the only way to keep you safe from them." But Elara didn't hear him. She was already gone. 1 year later, London, 1885. The grand ball at the Earl of Harrington's estate was the pinnacle of the social season. The chandeliers held 1,000 candles, casting a golden glow over the diamonds and silks of London's elite. Sebastian stood near a marble pillar, nursing a glass of scotch. He looked tired. The past year had aged him. The lines around his eyes were deeper, and his mouth was set in a permanent line of grim endurance. Beside him stood Lady Genevieve. She was beautiful in a sharp, predatory way, wearing a dress of crimson silk that cost more than most men earned in a lifetime. "Stop scowling, Sebastian," Genevieve hissed behind her fan. "People are talking. You look as though you are at a funeral." "Perhaps I am," Sebastian muttered. "Don't be dramatic. My father just signed the railway merger. Your precious Blackwood is safe. You should be thanking me, not sulking like a child." Sebastian took a drink to silence his retort. She was right. The estate was safe. But the house was cold. His life was empty, and every time it rained, he thought of a doctor's daughter with autumn eyes. Suddenly the orchestra faltered. It wasn't a planned stop. The violins simply trailed off one by one, creating a discordant screech before falling silent. The murmur of 300 guests died down instantly. The massive double doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. The major domo, usually a man of booming confidence, looked at the card in his hand, hesitated, and then cleared his throat nervously. Announcing, "The ward of the late Baron Rothschild, Miss Elara Vance." Sebastian froze. The glass in his hand slipped shattering on the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. At the top of the stairs stood a vision that defied logic. It was Elara. But it wasn't the girl in the muddy cloak. This woman was a queen. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet, cut in the latest Parisian fashion, hugging her figure in a way that was both modest and devastatingly alluring. Around her neck sat a necklace of sapphires, so large and dark they looked like pieces of the night sky. She didn't look down. She didn't look nervous. She looked down at the crowd with an air of absolute, terrifying boredom. Elara! Sebastian breathed the name torn from his throat. Genevieve stiffened beside him. "Vance? The country girl, I thought she was destitute." Elara began to descend the stairs. Every step was measured. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a wide path toward the center of the room. She wasn't walking. She was gliding. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, a man stepped forward to offer her his arm. It wasn't just any man. It was Lord Arthur Pendleton, the most ruthless banker in London, and a known rival of the Sterling family. Elara took his arm, her gloved hand resting lightly on his sleeve. Sebastian pushed off the pillar, ignoring Genevieve's protest. He moved through the crowd, his eyes locked on Elara. He had to know. He had to touch her to make sure she wasn't a hallucination brought on by guilt and scotch. He intercepted them near the fountain. "Elara," he said, his voice ragged. She stopped. Lord Pendleton stopped. Elara turned her head slowly. Her eyes met Sebastian's. There was no love in them. There was no hate. There was absolutely nothing. It was like looking into a mirror made of blue glass. "Your Grace," she said. Her voice was smoother, lower, stripped of the country lilt she used to have. It sounded like money. "You," Sebastian stammered. "You are back. We heard you went to America." "I did," she said pleasantly. "I found it very educational." "Elara, we need to talk," Sebastian said, reaching for her hand. She didn't pull away, but she didn't move toward him. Lord Pendleton stepped in, blocking Sebastian's path with a polite but iron-hard shoulder. "I believe the lady is spoken for this evening, Duke Thorne," Pendleton said with a smirk. "I am speaking to her, not you," Sebastian snapped. He looked back at Elara. "Please, just 5 minutes." Elara tilted her head. A small, cruel smile played on her lips. "I'm afraid my time is quite expensive these days, Sebastian, and judging by the state of your railway shares this morning, you cannot afford me." The crowd around them gasped. Sebastian recoiled as if slapped. "What do you mean, I mean?" Elara leaned in, whispering, so only he and Genevieve could hear, that Baron Rothschild didn't just leave me his name. He left me his portfolio, including the distressed debt of the Sterling Shipping Company. She looked at Genevieve, whose face had gone pale. "Enjoy the ball, Your Grace. I believe the music is starting again." Elara turned and walked away, the midnight blue dress swirling around her, leaving Sebastian standing in the wreckage of his own composure. The next morning, the headlines of the London Gazette did not discuss the Queen's health or the price of wheat. They discussed the sapphire siren. Sebastian sat in his study at Blackwood House, staring at the paper, but his mind was elsewhere. He was waiting for his solicitor, Mr. Bramwell. When Bramwell arrived, he looked as though he had seen a ghost. "Well," Sebastian barked, "is it true? How did a country doctor's daughter become the heir to Baron Rothschild?" Bramwell wiped sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "It is legitimate, Your Grace. It appears Baron Rothschild was her biological grandfather. He had been estranged from her mother for decades. When the doctor died 6 months ago, and Elara went to America, Rothschild's investigators found her. He died a month later, leaving everything to his only living kin." Sebastian sank back into his chair. "Everything, everything," Bramwell confirmed. "The mines in Cornwall, the textile mills in Manchester, and a controlling interest in the bank that holds the mortgage on the Sterling shipping line." Sebastian closed his eyes. Genevieve's father, Lord Sterling, was the only reason Blackwood was solvent. If Sterling went under, Sebastian went under, and Elara Vance held the axe. "She is coming here," Sebastian said quietly. "Here to the house?" "No, to the board meeting at the railway office. She sent a telegram this morning." 2 hours later, Sebastian sat at the head of the long mahogany table in the Blackwood railway offices. The air was thick with cigar smoke and tension. The 12 board members were murmuring nervously. The doors opened. Elara walked in. She was not wearing a ball gown today. She wore a tailored suit of charcoal wool, severe and sharp, with a hat tipped low over her eyes. She carried a leather portfolio. Lord Pendleton walked 2 steps behind her, like a loyal guard dog. "Gentlemen," she said, taking the seat at the opposite end of the table from Sebastian. She didn't wait for permission. "Miss Vance," one of the older directors huffed, "this is a closed meeting." "I own 20% of the stock as of this morning," Elara said, throwing a stack of certificates onto the table. "I suggest you open the meeting." Silence descended again. Sebastian watched her, fascinated and terrified. She was handling the room better than he ever had. "What do you want, Elara?" Sebastian asked across the expanse of the table. She met his gaze. I want to discuss the expansion into the north. I've reviewed the plans. They are inefficient. They were designed by the best engineers in England, Sebastian defended. They were designed to route around the Stirling estates, to spare Lord Stirling's hunting grounds, Ilara countered, pulling out a map. If you cut through the valley here, you save £2 million and 3 months of construction. But that would require seizing Stirling land, a director noted. Yes, Ilara said coldly. It would. We cannot do that, Sebastian said. Lord Stirling is my future father-in-law. Ilara smiled, and it was the coldest thing Sebastian had ever seen. Business is business, Your Grace. Isn't that what you told me in the library? Love does not keep the roof over Blackwood. Well, neither does sentimentality toward your father-in-law. She stood up. I am calling for a vote. We reroute the line through the Stirling estate, or I withdraw my capital from the bank that is floating your current loans. If I do that, the railway is bankrupt by Friday. The board members looked at each other. They looked at Sebastian. They looked at the money. All in favor of the reroute? The vice-chairman asked. 11 hands went up. Sebastian was the only one who didn't vote. He stared at Ilara, realizing the depth of her game. She wasn't just back to humiliate him. She was systematically dismantling the alliances he had sold his soul to build. Motion carried, Ilara said, snapping her portfolio shut. Good day, gentlemen. As she walked past Sebastian, he caught her wrist. Why? He whispered. You have the money. You have the power. Why destroy him? Ilara leaned down, her lips brushing his ear. I'm not destroying him, Sebastian. I'm saving you, but you're too blind to see it yet. She pulled her hand away and left the room. Sebastian sat there, the scent of her lavender perfume lingering in the air, trying to understand what she meant. Saving him. By bankrupting his fiancée's family, he didn't know that Ilara knew the secret that even Sebastian didn't know about the Stirling family, a secret that was hidden in the ledger she had found in her grandfather's safe. Genevieve wasn't just a spoiled heiress. She was dangerous, and Ilara had come back to burn the corruption out of Sebastian's life, even if she had to burn Sebastian to do it. The decision to route the railway through the Stirling estate had turned London society into a battlefield. The Stirlings were claiming outrage, painting Ilara as a vindictive upstart. Ilara, meanwhile, simply continued to work. 3 days after the board meeting, a site inspection was scheduled at the edge of the Stirling property, near the River Cray. It was necessary to survey the ground for the new bridge. Sebastian rode out on his black stallion Thunder. He looked every bit the brooding duke, his face set in grim determination. A carriage followed behind him, carrying Lady Genevieve and her father, Lord Stirling. They had insisted on coming ostensibly to protect their interests, but Sebastian suspected they were there to intimidate the surveyors. When they arrived at the riverbank, Ilara was already there. She was dressed in a riding habit of deep emerald green, standing next to the chief engineer, Mr. Wright. She held a blueprint in her gloved hands, pointing out the topography with the confidence of a seasoned general. You are late, Your Grace, Ilara called out, without looking up as Sebastian dismounted. We were delayed, Sebastian said, handing his reins to a groom. Lady Genevieve found the roads bumpy. Genevieve stepped out of the carriage, looking horrified at the mud on her boots. This is preposterous, Sebastian. You are actually going to let this woman tear up my father's prize fox hunting grounds. The board voted Genevieve, Sebastian said wearily. It is done. Ilara walked over, rolling up the blueprint. She looked at Genevieve with a cool, detached expression. The railway will bring trade to the local villages, Lady Genevieve. I'm sure the foxes will adapt. The question is, will you? Genevieve's eyes narrowed. She leaned in her voice, a venomous whisper. "Do not think you have won, you little peasant. Accidents happen on construction sites all the time. It would be a shame if your investment collapsed." Ilara didn't flinch. "Is that a threat?" "It's a prediction." Genevieve smiled sweetly, then turned to take Sebastian's arm. The inspection began. The group moved toward the old wooden service bridge that spanned the gorge. It was a rickety structure used only by gamekeepers, but it offered the best vantage point to survey the valley. "I need to see the bedrock on the far side," Ilara announced. "Mr. Wright, bring the theodolite." "I wouldn't recommend the bridge, Miss Vance," Lord Sterling spoke up suddenly. His voice was rough, his face flushed. "It hasn't been maintained." "I am light, Lord Sterling," Ilara said. "Unless you have something to hide on the other side." She stepped onto the wooden planks. They creaked ominously. Sebastian felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. He watched her walk her back, straight, fearlessly, moving toward the center of the gorge. "Ilara, wait." "Puh," Sebastian called out, an instinct he couldn't name driving him forward. He stepped onto the bridge after her. "Go back, Sebastian," she shouted over the roar of the river below. "I don't need a chaperone. I am not chaperoning you, I am—" Crack! The sound was like a gunshot. It wasn't the wood rotting. It was the sharp snap of a cut rope. The main support cable on the left side sheared through. The bridge lurched violently, tilting to a 45-degree angle. Ilara screamed as her feet slid out from under her. She scrambled for purchase on the slick wood, but gravity was too strong. She slid toward the edge, the churning water 50 feet below, waiting to swallow her. "Ilara!" Sebastian roared. He threw himself forward, sliding down the tilted planks. Just as Ilara slipped over the edge, her fingers scrabbling uselessly against the mossy wood, Sebastian lunged. He caught her wrist. The jolt nearly dislocated his shoulder. He slammed his chest against the railing, his boots hooked onto a protruding beam, holding her dangling weight with one arm. Ilara looked up at him, her eyes wide with terror. For the first time in a year, the mask of the cold heiress was gone. She was just the girl he loved. "Hold on." Sebastian gritted out his muscles, screaming. "I have you. I will not let you go. Not this time." Above them on the bank, Mr. Wright and the workers were shouting, scrambling to throw ropes. But Sebastian saw something else. He saw Lord Sterling standing by the anchor post where the cable had snapped. The older man wasn't rushing to help. He was standing perfectly still, watching. And next to him, Genevieve had her hand over her mouth, not in horror, but to hide a look of sheer cold calculation. "Pull her up, man," Wright shouted, tossing a rope down to Sebastian. With a heave of superhuman effort, fueled by adrenaline, Sebastian wrapped the rope around his arm and hauled Ilara up. She scrambled over the railing, collapsing onto the tilted deck into his arms. They lay there for a moment, tangled together, breathing heavily. Her heart was hammering against his chest. He buried his face in her hair, the smell of lavender and rain filling his senses. "You're safe," he whispered. "You're safe." Ilara pulled back her hands, trembling as she gripped his lapels. She looked at the severed cable swinging in the wind. The cut was clean. It wasn't rot. It was a knife. "That wasn't an accident, Sebastian," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. "They tried to kill me." Sebastian looked up at the bank where Lord Sterling was now feigning concern, shouting orders at the men. The realization hit Sebastian like a physical blow. Genevieve's prediction hadn't been idle talk. "I know," Sebastian said darkly. He helped Ilara stand, stabilizing her, as they shimmied back up the tilted bridge to safety. When they reached solid ground, Lord Sterling rushed forward. "My dear girl, a tragedy. We told you the bridge was unsafe." Ilara pushed her hair out of her face. She was muddy, shaking, and alive. She walked right up to Lord Stirling. "You are right, my lord," she said, her voice loud enough for the workers to hear. "The bridge was unsafe, just like your company." She turned to Sebastian. "I'm going back to London. Come to my townhouse tonight. Alone. If you want to know why I really bought your debt, you will be there at 8 o'clock. She mounted her horse without help and galloped away, leaving Sebastian standing between his fiancée and the truth. The Rothschild townhouse on Park Lane was a fortress of silence. At 8 p.m., sharp Sebastian knocked on the black lacquered door. He was ushered into the study. It was a masculine room, smelling of old paper and beeswax, clearly inherited from the late Baron. Ilara was standing by the fireplace, staring into the flames. She had changed into a simple white gown, her hair loose down her back. She looked vulnerable, but when she turned, her eyes were steel. "You came," she said. "They tried to kill you, Ilara," Sebastian said, stepping into the room. "I checked the cable. It was sawn halfway through. I should have the police arrest Stirling tonight." "You can't," Ilara said. "You have no proof it was him. It could have been a rogue worker, or—" She trailed off. "Or Genevieve." Sebastian finished. He felt sick. Why, Ilara? Why are they so desperate to stop the railway? Ilara walked to the desk and picked up a heavy leather-bound ledger. She dropped it on the table with a thud. "Because the railway doesn't just cut through their land, Sebastian. It cuts through their warehouse district." So Lara opened the book. "My grandfather was a suspicious man. Before he bought the Stirling debt, he hired private investigators to watch the Stirling shipping yards. Do you know what they found in the warehouses that the railway is about to demolish?" Sebastian shook his head. "Nothing," Ilara whispered. "They found absolutely nothing." Sebastian frowned, confused. "I don't understand. The Stirling shipping line is the largest importer of silk and spices in the empire." "That is the lie, Sebastian," Ilara cried out. "Look at the ledger. These are the real accounts. Lord Stirling hasn't had a ship dock with a profit in 5 years. He lost the fleet in a storm off the Cape in 82 and never insured them. He has been moving empty crates between warehouses to fool the investors and the banks." Sebastian felt the room spin. "Fraud. Massive systematic fraud," Ilara confirmed. "He is bankrupt, Sebastian. He owes millions. The only thing keeping the creditors at bay is the rumor of a merger with the Duke of Blackwood. He needs your title, your reputation, and your railway money to pay off his debts before the bubble bursts." Sebastian sank into a chair. The betrayal washed over him. He had broken Ilara's heart to save his family estate, only to align himself with a black hole that would have swallowed Blackwood whole. "If the railway goes through," Ilara explained, sitting opposite him, "the warehouses have to be inspected and demolished. The world would see they are empty. The fraud would be exposed. That is why they tried to drop me into the river, to stop the construction." Sebastian covered his face with his hands. "I am a fool. I told you I was marrying for duty. I was marrying for ruin." "You were being manipulated," Ilara said softly. "Genevieve knew. She knew everything. She wasn't loving you, Sebastian. She was securing a lifeboat for her sinking family." Sebastian looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. "And you came back to destroy them." "I came back to stop you from making a mistake you couldn't fix," Ilara said, her voice trembling. "I wanted to hate you, Sebastian. God knows I tried. I wanted to take your estate and leave you with nothing, just as you left me. But—" She looked away, tears shimmering in her eyes. "But when I saw the reports, when I saw they were going to drag you down with them, I couldn't let it happen. I bought the debt so I could control when the truth came out. I wanted to save you." Sebastian stood up slowly. He walked around the desk and knelt before her chair. He took her hands. They were cold. "You saved my life today on that bridge," he said, hoarse. "But you saved my soul months ago, and I didn't even know it. I am not the girl you sent away." "Sebastian," Ilara warned, pulling her hands back slightly. "I am not the doctor's daughter who waits for scraps of affection. I am Ilara Vance. I am powerful, and I am angry." "I know," Sebastian said, "and I deserve your anger. But tell me, is there anything left? Is there any part of you that still remembers the riverbank?" Ilara looked at him. The tension in the room was electric. The anger was there, yes, but beneath it lay the charred remains of a love that refused to die. "It doesn't matter what I remember," she whispered. "You are still engaged to Genevieve, and if you break the engagement now without cause, the scandal will ruin you. Sterling will sue you for breach of promise. He will drag the Blackwood name through the mud." Sebastian stood up, his face hardening into the granite mask again, but this time the strength was real. "Let him try," Sebastian said. "I have the ledger now. I am going to the Sterling ball tomorrow night, and I am going to end this." "The ball?" Ilara asked. "That is their territory. It will be dangerous." "Then come with me," Sebastian offered his hand. "Walk into the lion's den with me, not as my enemy, as my partner." Ilara looked at his hand. It was a risk. It was madness. She took it. "Pick me up at 7, she said. "And Sebastian, yes, wear black. We are going to a funeral." The grand ballroom of Sterling Manor was designed to intimidate. Gilded mirrors stretched from the parquet floor to the frescoed ceiling, reflecting the light of 3 massive crystal chandeliers. On the night of November 17th, 1885, those mirrors reflected the absolute pinnacle of London society and the colossal arrogance of Lord Archibald Sterling. The air was thick with the scent of white lilies, heavy French perfume, and the crisp metallic smell of expensive champagne. Lord Sterling stood at the head of the receiving line, his chest puffed out like a pigeon, his hand resting possessively on the shoulder of his daughter, Lady Genevieve. Genevieve looked triumphant. She wore a gown of white satin, encrusted with pearls intended to look bridal, a diamond tiara, a family heirloom that, unbeknownst to the guests, had been secretly pawned and replaced with paste 3 months prior, glittered in her pale hair. "A magnificent evening, Lord Sterling," murmured Colonel Fitzroy, bowing low. "The merger with the Blackwood estate. It is the talk of the season. It is the salvation of the season, Colonel Cohoff." Sterling boomed his voice, carrying over the string quartet. "The Duke sees reason. He knows that bloodlines must unite to preserve the Empire's commerce. We sign the final papers at midnight?" Genevieve fanned herself, smiling tightly. "Sebastian is simply late, Father. You know how he broods. He is likely composing a sonnet to my beauty as we speak." A few guests tittered politely, but the laughter died in their throats as the grandfather clock in the hall began to chime the quarter hour. Dong, dong, dong. As the final chime faded, the heavy double doors at the far end of the ballroom did not just open. They were thrown wide by the footman, who looked pale and unsettled. The majordomo, usually a man of booming projection, stepped forward. His voice wavered. His Grace the Duke of Blackwood, Sebastian Thorne, and his guest. He didn't finish the introduction. He didn't have to. Sebastian walked in first. He was not wearing the festive tails of a celebratory fiancé. He was dressed in a tuxedo of severe matte, black, his face set in a line of granite determination. He looked less like a groom and more like an executioner. But it was the woman on his arm who sucked the oxygen out of the room. Ilara Vance. She had shed the muted greys of a governess and the modest wools of a doctor's daughter. Tonight she was war personified. She wore a gown of crimson silk, the colour of a fresh wound or a burning ember. It was cut in the Parisian style, daringly low at the shoulders, with a train that hissed against the floor as she moved. Around her neck lay the Rothschild sapphire stones, so large and dark they looked like bruises against her alabaster skin. They were worth more than the entire Sterling estate, and everyone in the room knew it. The silence that fell was instant and absolute. The orchestra stopped mid-bar. A glass crashed to the floor somewhere in the back, but no one turned to look. 300 pairs of eyes were locked on the couple, gliding, not walking, gliding across the empty dance floor. "She's here." Genevieve hissed her fingers, digging into her father's arm. "You said she was handled. You said the bridge." "Quiet!" Sterling snapped, though his own face had gone the colour of old parchment. Sebastian and Ilara did not stop until they were 10 feet from the Sterling family, right in the centre of the room, surrounded by the shocked elite of London. "Sebastian!" Genevieve found her voice shrill and trembling, trying to salvage the moment. She stepped forward, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. "You are terribly late, darling, and you have brought the help. How charitable of you." The insult hung in the air, sharp and desperate. Sebastian didn't look at her. He looked at Lord Sterling. "I am not here for charity, Genevieve," Sebastian said. His voice was not loud, but in the cavernous silence it sounded like thunder. "And I am not here for a wedding. I am here for an accounting." Lord Sterling laughed a nervous, blustering sound. "An accounting? My dear boy, this is a party. We can discuss business in the morning. Come have a drink. Security escort Miss Vance to the kitchen where she can find some supper." 2 burly guards stepped forward from the shadows. "Stay back," Ilara said. She didn't shout. She didn't scream. She simply spoke with the absolute authority of a woman who owned the bank that paid the guards' salaries. She reached into a small velvet purse at her waist and pulled out a folded document. She snapped it open. The paper was crisp and white. "These men do not work for you anymore, Lord Sterling," Ilara said coolly. "In fact, nothing in this house belongs to you anymore. Not the wine in your cellar, not the horses in your stable, and certainly not the roof over your head." "Insolence!" Sterling roared, stepping forward, his hands shaking. "I'm a peer of the realm. You are a nobody, a country doctor's bastard." "I am the majority shareholder of the Sovereign Bank of London," Ilara corrected him, her voice slicing through his bluster. "And as of 5:30 p.m. today, I have called in your loans." She turned to the crowd, addressing the room at large. "Lord Sterling has been using the Blackwood merger as collateral for debts totaling £3 million. He claimed his shipping line was solvent. He claimed his warehouses were full of silk and spices from the East." "They are," Sterling screamed, sweat pouring down his face. "My ships are the envy of the Empire. Your ships are ghosts." Sebastian stepped in, moving to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ilara. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a heavy leather-bound ledger. He threw it onto the floor at Sterling's feet. It landed with a heavy thud. "I inspected the dockyards myself this afternoon, Sterling, with the Chief Inspector of Scotland Yard." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The words, "Scotland Yard," caused several guests to take a step back, distancing themselves from the host. "We opened the crates in Warehouse 4 and Warehouse 9. Sebastian continued, his blue eyes cold and unforgiving. "Do you know what we found? Sawdust. Stones. Weighted bags of sand. You haven't had a legitimate cargo in 5 years. You have been defrauding investors, banks, and the crown." "Lies!" Genevieve shrieked. She lunged at Sebastian, her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly fury. "He is lying. He just wants to break the engagement to be with this trollop." Sebastian caught Genevieve's wrist before she could strike him. He held her there, not hurting her, but stopping her cold. "Do not speak of her," Sebastian whispered, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "You forfeited the right to speak when you gave the order to cut the cable." The room went deadly still. Even the rustling of silk stopped. "The cable," a duchess in the front row whispered. Elara stepped forward. She walked right up to Genevieve, invading her space, the crimson dress brushing against the white satin. "The bridge, Genevieve," Elara said softly. "The survey inspection. You knew I would be on it. You knew the drop was 50 feet into the Cray River. You didn't just want me bankrupt. You wanted me dead." I don't know what you're talking about," Genevieve stammered, but her eyes darted wildly to her father. "We found the man you paid." Elara lied. It was a bluff, a calculated gamble. The groom, the one with the scar, he was quite talkative once the police offered him immunity. It worked. Lord Sterling's knees gave way. "It was her idea," Sterling blurted out, pointing a shaking finger at his own daughter. She said if the girl was gone, the Duke would come back to us. I only wanted to save the company. I didn't want violence." It was Genevieve. The betrayal was total. Genevieve stared at her father, her mouth open in horror. The crowd erupted into whispers. The facade of the happy family shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. "That is enough," a deep voice boomed from the doorway. Inspector Hopkins of Scotland Yard stepped into the light, flanked by 4 uniformed constables. "Lord Archibald Sterling, Lady Genevieve," the inspector said, tipping his hat grimly. "You are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder." "No! No, you can't!" Genevieve screamed as a constable took her arm. "I am a lady. I am the future Duchess of Blackwood." "You," Sebastian said, turning his back on her, "are nothing." The scene that followed was chaotic. Lord Sterling began to weep, begging the nearest guests for a loan, for a character reference, for mercy. Genevieve fainted, a theatrical, graceful collapse that no one bought, forcing the constables to drag her out by her arms, her heels scuffing the expensive floor. As the doors closed behind the disgraced family, the ballroom was left in a stunned, vibrating silence. The guests looked at the empty space where the Sterlings had stood, and then they looked at Sebastian and Elara. They stood alone in the center of the vast floor. The wreckage of a dynasty lay metaphorically at their feet. Elara let out a breath she had been holding for an hour. Her hand trembled slightly at her side. Sebastian saw it. He reached out and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, ignoring the 300 people staring at them. "I thought I would feel happy," Elara whispered. "But it just feels sad. They had everything, and they threw it away for greed. They threw it away because they didn't know what real value was," Sebastian said. He lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. "Now, we have a room full of people waiting to see what the new owners of the Sterling estate will do." Elara looked around the room. She saw fear in the eyes of the bankers who had shunned her father. She saw respect in the eyes of the matrons who had mocked her dress a year ago. She straightened her spine. The queen of the boardroom returned. "Maestro," Elara called out to the terrified orchestra conductor. Yes, Miss Vance." "The playlist for the evening is unfinished," she said, her voice clear and commanding. "Play the Blue Danube, and play it loudly." At once, Miss," As the opening notes of the waltz filled the room, swelling and triumphant, Sebastian placed his hand on Ilara's waist. "May I have this dance, Miss Vance?" he asked, his eyes crinkling with the first genuine smile he had worn in public in months. "I believe the last time we danced, I stepped on your toes." "If you step on my toes tonight, Your Grace," Ilara smiled, a true, dazzling smile, "I will foreclose on your castle next." "I have no doubt you would." Sebastian swept her into the spin. They moved together in perfect harmony, a swirl of black and crimson, reclaiming the space, reclaiming the night and reclaiming their future. The crowd parted, giving them the entire floor. For a few minutes there was no scandal, no fraud, no gossip. There was only the Duke and the doctor's daughter, dancing on the ruins of their enemies perfectly in step, while the world watched in awe. The scandal of the Sterling arrest burned through London like a fever. For 2 weeks the newspapers wrote of nothing else. They called Ilara the Iron Heiress, and Sebastian the Just Duke. But while the city buzzed with gossip, the two people at the center of the storm had vanished. Sebastian returned to Blackwood Manor. He retreated to the silence of the country, needing to wash the taste of the Sterling ballroom from his mouth. On the morning of December 5th, exactly 3 weeks after the arrest, the rain returned to Leicestershire. It drummed against the stone walls of the manor, a relentless, rhythmic pounding that mirrored the day Sebastian had shattered Ilara's heart in this very house. He stood in the library, leaning against the cold marble of the fireplace. The fire was roaring, but he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The door creaked open. "Mr. Bramwell said you were in here," a voice said softly. Sebastian turned. Ilara stood in the doorway. She had left the crimson silks and the Rothschild diamonds in London. Today she wore a simple dress of dove-grey wool, her hair pulled back in a loose ribbon. She looked less like the avenging angel of the ballroom, and more like the girl he had fallen in love with by the river, only stronger. "Harder, Ilara," Sebastian breathed. "I didn't know you were coming." "We have contracts to sign, Your Grace," she said, walking into the room. She carried a leather folder, clutching it like a shield. "The new steel bridge for the railway. My engineers have finished the designs. I need your approval to break ground." She walked to the massive mahogany desk, the same desk where she had left her ring a year ago, and spread the blueprints out. "If you look here," she pointed her finger, tracing a line on the paper. "We've reinforced the pylons. It will hold 50 tons of cargo. It won't break again." Sebastian watched her. He watched the way her brow furrowed in concentration. He watched the way her hand moved. He didn't look at the blueprints. "Stop," Sebastian said. Ilara paused, her finger hovering over the paper. "Is there an issue with the design? The cost is covered by—" "Stop talking about the bridge, Ilara." Sebastian pushed off the fireplace and walked toward her. The air in the room shifted, becoming heavy with unsaid words. Ilara straightened up, closing the folder. She met his gaze, her chin lifted in that defiant way he adored. "If we aren't talking about business, Sebastian, then why am I here? Because this is the room where I made the biggest mistake of my life," Sebastian said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I cannot stand to be in it without fixing what I broke." He walked around the desk, invading her personal space, stopping just inches from her. He could smell the rain on her clothes and the faint scent of lavender soap. "You didn't just break a promise, Sebastian," Ilara whispered, her composure cracking just a fraction. "You broke me. You looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't enough. You told me that money was more important than loyalty." "I lied," Sebastian said immediately. I lied to you, and I lied to myself. I thought I was being noble. I thought I was saving you from a life of poverty with a destitute duke. I was a coward, Ilara. I was terrified of failing my father's legacy, so I sacrificed the only thing that made that legacy worth having. He reached into his pocket. His hand trembled as he pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't new. The velvet was worn. He placed it on the desk, right on top of the blueprints for the steel bridge. When you left that day, Sebastian continued, his blue eyes locked on hers. I didn't sell this. I didn't throw it away. I kept it in the top drawer right next to my pistol, because every time I looked at it, I wanted to remember what I had lost. Ilara looked at the box. She knew what was inside. It wasn't a diamond the size of a quail's egg. It wasn't a sapphire worth a shipping fleet. She reached out and opened it. Inside sat a simple, thin gold band, the band she had bought him with her own savings 2 years ago. You kept it, she whispered. I never took it off in my heart, Sebastian said. Ilara, look at me. She looked up. Tears were swimming in her autumn eyes. You don't need me, Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a hush. You have proved that to the world. You have more money than God, more power than the sterling family ever dreamed of. You don't need a protector. You don't need a title. He took a breath, steeling himself. But I need you. I need you. Like this house needs a foundation. I am asking you not as a duke to a commoner and not as a business partner. I am asking you as a man who has learned his lesson in the hardest way possible. Will you forgive me? Ilara stared at him. The silence stretched, filled only by the crackle of the fire and the rain against the glass. She reached out and took the ring from the box. She held the cold gold in her palm. I don't want a savior, Sebastian, she said firmly, and I don't want a husband who hides things from me to protect me. Never again, Sebastian vowed. We face everything together. The debts, the scandals, the victories. Equals. Equals, Ilara repeated, testing the word. She smiled. It was a slow, tentative smile that grew into something radiant, breaking through the gloom of the library, like the sun breaking through the storm clouds. Then I suppose, she said, her voice trembling with laughter and tears, we should stop wasting time on blueprints. She handed him the ring. Sebastian took it, his fingers brushing hers, sending a jolt of electricity through them both. He didn't kneel, they were equals now, standing eye to eye. He took her hand and slid the simple gold band onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had never left. Marry me, Ilara Vance, he whispered. Let's give them a real scandal. Yes, she whispered back. Yes. He pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. He kissed her deep and desperate, pouring a year of longing, regret, and relief into the embrace. Ilara kissed him back, her hands tangling in his hair, the pain of the past washing away with the rain outside. At that moment, the heavy clouds outside the window finally broke. A shaft of pale golden sunlight pierced through the gloom, illuminating the dust motes, dancing in the library air. The Duke and the heiress stood together in the light. The railway would be built. The estate would be saved. But in the quiet of the library, none of that mattered. They had found something far more valuable than a fortune. They had found their way back to each other. And so the silence in the ballroom was replaced by the laughter in the library. Ilara Vance taught Duke Sebastian a lesson that no amount of money could buy. That true power isn't about controlling the world, it's about having someone who will stand by you when the world falls apart. She didn't just save his estate, she saved his soul. What do you think of Sebastian's redemption? Do you think he deserved a second chance after what he did or should? Ilara have walked away with her millions. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get a debate going. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps us create more dramas like this. And make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Next week, we're heading to the Wild West for a story of a sheriff who falls for the outlaw he's supposed to arrest. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.